Welcome back to U.S. History class, everybody. Grab a seat and let's get settled. Today, we're diving into a really crucial explainer, covering exactly how international human rights evolved after the sheer devastation of World War II. We're going to look at the catalyst for this massive change, the brilliant individuals who pushed for progress, and the intense global hurdles that stood in their way. So, notebooks out and let's get to it. Here's a quick look at today's agenda. We've got our welcome to class, the horrors of World War II, post-war international law, the Cold War complication, defining genocide, and we'll wrap it all up with a pop quiz. Section 1, welcome to class. Okay, just a few quick announcements before we get into the heavy stuff. Remember the golden rule for this week. Essays and exams earn you lunch, so knock those out early. It's actually hard to believe, but we literally only have 12 classes remaining in the semester. Time is just flying by. Also, keep in mind that tomorrow is an asynchronous learning day, which makes it your absolute last chance to turn in assignment 10.14.3. Seriously, do not miss that deadline. All right, let's get our brains fired up for our Do Now warm-up exercise. In your own words, what are human rights? Like, what does that term actually mean to you? I want you to think about human rights sort of like unbendable classroom rules that protect every single student, no matter whose room they're in. What specific rights do you think should be automatically included just by virtue of being human? And what violations of those rights do you remember from our global history unit? Hold on to those thoughts as we move forward today. Section 2, the horrors of World War. You know, the sheer bluntness of history is absolutely staggering sometimes. The horrifying discoveries made at places like the Belsen concentration camp in April of 1945 revealed an almost incomprehensible loss of life. The sign erected by the British upon liberation stands as this stark physical testament to the atrocities of the German New Order. This wasn't just a battlefield, it was a site of systematic eradication. Just look at the figures from that very sign. 10,000 unburied dead were found there, and another 13,000 victims died shortly after liberation, simply because they were too starved or sick to be saved. I really want you to let the sheer magnitude of those numbers settle in your minds for a second. And remember, that was just one camp. The atrocities and mass killings committed against innocent victims during the Holocaust made it desperately clear to the world that unprecedented global laws were totally necessary. The international community looked at this devastation and realized, wow, basic moral expectations just aren't enough to protect humanity anymore. We absolutely needed codified, binding international law. Section 3, post-war international law. So, let's look at how the international community actively responded to this, and who stepped up to lead the charge. One absolutely vital individual you need to know for the exam, and, well, just for life in general, is Eleanor Roosevelt. She wasn't just a former First Lady, she was a powerhouse diplomat. She passionately led the effort at the newly formed United Nations to draft and adopt the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This was designed as a sweeping guarantee of fundamental rights to all people, everywhere, totally regardless of their nationality. And this incredible momentum led to two more major historical data points that you definitely need to write down. First, we have the 1948 Genocide Convention, which officially made it an international crime to destroy a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. Second, the 1949 Geneva Convention. This established strict rules specifically to protect prisoners of war and innocent civilians during times of armed conflict. Section 4, the Cold War complication. Now, having a rule written on the chalkboard is one thing, but as any teacher will tell you, enforcing it is a whole different ballgame. I want to use a little Socratic questioning here and ask the class to think critically. Despite these groundbreaking, highly celebrated laws being put on paper in the late 1940s, were they actually effective immediately? What do you think? What might stop the global community from actually holding bad actors accountable? Well, the historical reality is that enforcement was incredibly complicated by the Cold War. The globe essentially split right in half, locked in a tense standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union. When the two most powerful entities on Earth are in a constant state of political and military friction, constantly stalling and vetoing each other at the UN, true global cooperation on human rights becomes, honestly, nearly impossible. When we map this out on a timeline, you'll see a massive gap. We've got the energetic adoption of these conventions in 1948 and 1949, right after the Second World War. But then, progress essentially freezes for decades, all the way until the end of the Cold War in 1991. For over 40 years, international human rights law was largely stuck in the mud of geopolitical rivalry. It was really only when the divided world reunited, signaled by the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War in 1991, that we saw a massive shift. This brought a renewed focus on human rights. The metaphorical and physical walls finally came down, paving the way for new opportunities, true global cooperation, and a unified push for dignity, freedom, justice, and equality for everyone. It was a whole new era of hope and responsibility. Section 5. Defining genocide. Before we wrap up the main lesson today, we must understand the etymology here to truly grasp the weight of this word. The root geno refers to a race, tribe, or group of people, kind of like genetics, the study of inherited traits. And the suffix "cide" means killing, like homicide, the killing of a person. When you bring them together, genocide describes the deliberate, systematic destruction or killing of a specific ethnic, racial, national, or religious group. It is literally the ultimate violation of human rights. Section 6, Pop Quiz. All right, class, please close your notebooks, cap your pens, and focus purely on the information you've gathered today. It's time to test your retention of this explainer with a quick pop quiz. Let's see how much you absorbed. First question to see who is paying attention to our key figures. Who was the important individual that passionately championed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights at the UN? Shout it out in your head. If you said Eleanor Roosevelt, give yourself a gold star. Next question, testing your historical data points. In what exact year was the Geneva Convention adopted to specifically shield prisoners of war and innocent civilians from the horrors of combat? Think back to our timeline for a second. Yep, it was 1949, right on the heels of the 1948 Genocide Convention. And finally, we arrive at tonight's homework. I want you to deeply consider this provocative thought, and I am expecting a solid paragraph on this tomorrow. Looking at the world outside our classroom right now, observing current events and modern conflicts, do you believe these post-war laws, these grand declarations and conventions we study today, are actually working to prevent human rights violations? Are they effective shields, or are they just words on paper? Think critically about it, and I'll see you next class.